The council chambers of Valoria Prime glowed with soft light as Jinwan stood before the assembled elders of an ancient civilization. Yuna remained at his side, her hand brushing against his as they faced judgment together. Elder Sejun spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. The council has debated your fate for 3 days, human, and we have reached a decision that has divided us unlike any matter in recent memory. Jinhuan kept his expression calm, even as his heart raced. Whatever you decide, I stand by my actions and my words. We know, Sejun replied with what might have been approval. That is precisely what has convinced the majority to spare your life and your memories. A wave of relief washed over Jinwan, but the elder raised his hand before celebration could begin. However, there remains the matter of the Keth, who now know that a Valorian survived their hunt and was aided by a human. They will not stop searching, another elder added. Their greed knows no bounds, and they will eventually discover the connection between your species and ours. Yuna stepped forward. Then perhaps it is time we stopped hiding and started fighting. Her words sent ripples of shock through the chamber. For thousands of years we have watched the Keth prey on the weak and vulnerable. She continued, we have evidence of their crimes spanning countless worlds, but we never acted because we feared revealing ourselves. She looked at Jinwan with eyes full of determination. This human taught me that safety purchased through an action is no safety at all, and that the only way to truly protect something is to stand and fight for it. Elder Sejun stroked his golden-streaked beard thoughtfully. What exactly are you proposing, Yuna? We have records of every atrocity the Keth have committed, she answered. Every species they have hunted and every world they have plundered. And we could broadcast this evidence to every major civilization in the galaxy simultaneously. Murmurs spread through the council as elders discussed the implications. That would expose our existence to countless species. One protested, yes it would, Jinwan interjected. But it would also prove that the Valorians are not just observers, but protectors. He addressed the entire council with conviction. Your people have spent ages judging whether other species are worthy, but you never considered that they might be judging you too. And right now you are failing that test by hiding while innocents suffer. Elder Sejun stood and walked to the center of the chamber. The human speaks uncomfortable truths, he admitted. We have become so focused on preservation that we have forgotten our original purpose. He turned to face his fellow elders. Long ago, our ancestors chose to watch over younger species and guide them toward wisdom. But somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that watching from safety was the same as actually helping. His ancient eyes seemed to burn with renewed purpose. I say we honor our ancestors by honoring this human's example. And I vote that we act. The vote that followed was close but decisive for the first time in countless generations. The Valorians would step out of the shadows over the following weeks. Jinwan worked alongside Yuna to compile evidence and plan their exposure of the Keth. His knowledge of human communication systems proved invaluable in designing a broadcast that would reach maximum audiences across the galaxy. When the moment finally came, Jinwan stood in the transmission center with Yuna by his side. Ready? She asked. I was ready the moment I picked up that wounded animal in the forest, he replied with a smile. The broadcast went out across subspace frequencies, delivered to thousands of worlds simultaneously. It contained centuries of evidence documenting Keth crimes, from hunting Valorians for their biological material to enslaving entire populations for profit. The response was immediate. An overwhelming species that had lived in fear of Keth raiders suddenly found allies they never knew existed. Governments that had looked the other way began demanding justice within months. The Keth Empire faced sanctions from every major civilization in known space. The poachers who had hunted Yuna were captured and brought before an interspecies tribunal. the first of many who would face consequences for their crimes. You started something remarkable, Elder Seijin told Jinwan as they watched the trial broadcast. Not just the fall of the Keth, but the awakening of my own people. Jinwan shook his head. Yuna started it when she chose to reveal herself to me instead of just disappearing. And your people finished it when they chose to act. The elder smiled, an expression that looked unfamiliar on his ancient face. The council has made another decision, one that concerns your species specifically. He handed Jinwan a small crystal that glowed with inner light. Humanity is no longer under observation, and this crystal will allow you to contact us whenever your people need our assistance. Jinman accepted the crystal with trembling hands. What about Yuna? The elder glanced across the room to where Yuna stood watching them. She has requested permission to accompany you back to Earth, and the council has granted it. That evening, Yuna found Jinwan standing on a balcony overlooking the crystal spires of Valoria Prime. Elder Seijin told me about your request, he said without turning. Yuna moved to stand beside him. I spent centuries observing from a distance, she said softly, watching life unfold without ever being part of it. And you showed me what I was missing. She turned to face him. I want to experience your world properly this time. Not as a hidden observer, but as a participant. Not as a test, but as someone who genuinely wants to understand. Jinwan finally looked at her, and his eyes held a warmth that made her ancient heart feel young again. There is another reason too, she admitted. Something I realized during our dimensional passage when our minds touched. What is that? I love you, Yuna said simply. Not because you saved me, or because you challenged my people, or because you changed galactic politics, but because you showed me that kindness exists even in the darkest corners of the universe. Jinwan reached out and took her hand. I think I started loving you when you were still a small creature with silver fur, he confessed. I just did not have a name for it until now. 1 month later, they stood together on the streets of Seoul as evening crowds rushed past them. No one paid attention to the silver-haired woman walking beside the young Korean man, and no one suspected that an ancient alien moved among them in human guise. So many people, Yuna observed with wonder. And they all have stories and dreams and fears just like any species I have ever observed, Jinwan smiled. Welcome to humanity. They walked in comfortable silence until they passed a narrow alley. Yuna stopped suddenly, her attention caught by something in the shadows. A small cat lay curled against the trash bin, its orange fur matted with dirt, and one of its legs held at an awkward angle. Jinwan noticed her looking and followed her gaze before Yuna could say anything. He was already moving toward the injured animal. He knelt down slowly, speaking softly to the frightened creature, and carefully gathered it into his arms, just as he had done with a silver-furred alien on a distant moon. Yuna watched him with tears forming in her luminous eyes, understanding now why her people should have been paying closer attention to humanity all along. It was not their technology, or their strength, or their ambition that made them special. It was this simple refusal to walk past suffering, this stubborn insistence on helping, even when there was nothing to gain. Let us take her home, Jinwan said as he cradled the cat gently. Yuna smiled and took his arm. Yes, she agreed. Let us go home. Together they walked into the gathering twilight. Two souls who had found each other across the vast distances of space, bound not by fate or destiny, but by something far more powerful, the simple choice to be kind. The dimensional passage was unlike anything Jinwan could have imagined. Colors that had no name swirled around him as the fabric of reality folded and twisted, and he felt his body being pulled in directions that should not exist. Only Yuna's hands kept him anchored, her grip tight and steady as she guided them through the impossible space between worlds. He wanted to scream, but he had no voice. Wanted to close his eyes, but he had no eyelids. wanted to understand, but his mind could not comprehend what was happening. Then he remembered what Yuna had said about trust. Jinwan stopped fighting and let himself fall into the chaos, believing with every fiber of his being that she would bring them through safely the moment he surrendered. The violent sensations faded into something almost peaceful. He felt Yuna's presence surrounding him like warm sunlight, and he realized that their connection had become something more than physical contact. They were sharing thoughts and emotions, their consciousness merging briefly as they traveled through the dimensional fold together. In that instant of connection, Jinwan experienced fragments of Yuna's memories. He saw ancient cities of crystal and light, watched civilizations bloom and wither across countless worlds, felt the weight of millennia pressing down on a being who had lived too long and cared too little. He also felt her loneliness, as deep and vast as the spaces between stars, and her desperate hope that this human might somehow fill the emptiness that had consumed her for so long. Then reality snapped back into focus, and they tumbled onto solid ground. Jinwan gasped for air as his body remembered how to function, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. "You survived," Yuna said with wonder and relief as she helped him sit up. "No human has ever completed the passage before." Jinwan took several deep breaths before looking around at their new surroundings. They stood in a vast chamber carved from pale stone that seemed to emit its own soft glow. Towering columns rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into misty darkness. Everywhere he looked, he saw beings of incredible beauty watching them with expressions of shock. "This is Valoria Prime," Yuna explained softly. "The hidden homeworld of my people." An older Valorian approached them, his silver hair streaked with veins of pure gold, and his face lined with the weight of ages beyond counting. "Yuna," he said in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder, "you have brought an outsider to our sacred world." Other Valorians gathered around, their murmuring voices filling the chamber with sounds of confusion and anger. Yuna stood up straight and faced the elder with determination. "This human saved my life, Elder Seyun, and I brought him here because the Keth had us surrounded with no other escape." "Then you should have let them take you," another Valorian called out, "rather than reveal our existence to a primitive species." Jinwan struggled to his feet, his legs still weak from the dimensional passage. "Primitive," he repeated, and despite his condition, there was strength in his voice. "I may come from a young species, but I think you have forgotten what it means to be truly alive." The chamber fell silent as the human dared to speak. Elder Seijun studied him with ancient eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. "Explain yourself, creature." Jinwan looked around at the beautiful faces watching him, seeing for the first time the emptiness behind their perfect features. "Yuna told me that your people observe and judge, but never act," he said. "You watch others struggle and suffer while you stay safe in your hidden world, convinced that your neutrality makes you wise." He took a step toward the elder. "But wisdom without compassion is just cowardice dressed in pretty clothes. And judgment without action is just self-righteousness with no consequences." Several Valorians moved as if to silence him, but Elder Sejun raised a hand to stop them. "Continue," he said. "I am just one human from one small planet," Jinwan admitted. "I have no power and no special abilities. I cannot transform or travel through dimensions, and I certainly cannot live for thousands of years." He straightened his shoulders. "But when I saw a wounded creature in the forest, I chose to help without asking what I would receive in return. And when the Keth came to hunt Yuna, I chose to fight beside her instead of running away to save myself." His voice grew stronger as he spoke. "Your people have all the power in the galaxy, but you use it to hide. While my people have almost nothing, but we still reach out to help those who need us." He turned to look at Yuna, his eyes softening. "You wanted to know if humanity was worthy of joining the galactic community. But maybe the real question is whether you are worthy of us." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Elder Sajan did something that seemed to shock every Valorian present. He laughed. "In all my centuries," the Elder said with genuine amusement, "no being has ever spoken to me with such audacity." He approached Jinwan and studied him more closely. "Yuna reported on your actions through her test period, and we observed your choice to save her despite the danger. But I did not truly understand what that meant until now." He turned to address the gathered Valorians. "This human has reminded us of something we lost long ago. The understanding that observation without participation is merely another form of death." The murmuring began again. But this time, Jinwan heard different tones in the voices. Some still sounded angry, but others seemed thoughtful or even ashamed. A younger Valorian stepped forward with hostility in her eyes. He should still have his memories erased and be returned to his own world. She insisted. "Our secrecy has protected us for millennia. And what has that secrecy cost us?" Yuna challenged her. "We have become ghosts haunting the edges of history, watching but never touching, existing but never living." Elder Sian raised his hands for silence. "The council will decide this human's fate through proper deliberation. But for now he will be treated as an honored guest." He looked at Jinwan with something approaching respect. "You have given us much to consider, young one. And regardless of what the council decides, I thank you for your words." As Valorians dispersed to discuss what had happened, Yuna led Jinwan through the crystalline halls of her homeworld. "That was either very brave or very foolish," she said with a small smile. "Probably both," Jinwan admitted. "But someone needed to say it." Yuna stopped walking and turned to face him. "The council will debate for hours, and many of them will argue for erasing your memories or worse." She took his hand. "But I want you to know that whatever happens, what you said was true, and you have changed something in me that I thought was dead forever." Jinwan looked into her violet eyes and saw something he had first noticed when she was still a small wounded creature in his arms. "Then let us hope your council is wise enough to listen," he said, "because I have a feeling this galaxy needs some shaking up." Somewhere in the distance, the council chambers began to fill with voices raised in the first real debate. The Valorians had experienced in centuries. Change was coming, carried by a human who had simply refused to walk past a creature in need. The forest of Kepler 442b seemed to close around them like a living maze as Jinwan and Yuna fled deeper into the wilderness behind them. The sounds of Keth hunters crashing through the undergrowth grew closer with each passing minute. Jinwan pulled Yuna down behind a massive fallen tree, pressing a finger to his lips as a patrol of 3 reptilian creatures stomped past their hiding spot. The Keth were terrifying to behold. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with scaled skin the color of dried blood and eyes that glowed with predatory hunger, they carried energy rifles that hummed with deadly power, and their armor was decorated with trophies taken from their many hunts. "How many are there?" Yuna whispered once the patrol had moved on. Jinwan checked his scanner, which he had managed to grab during their escape. "At least 20 that I can detect, and they are spreading out to cover more ground." He studied the terrain map on his device and made a quick decision. "Follow me and stay low." They moved through the forest using techniques Jinwan had learned during 8 months of surveying this moon. He led Yuna along game trails where local predators had worn paths through the dense vegetation, knowing that the Keth would be watching the more obvious routes. When they reached a stream that flowed toward the eastern mountains, Jinwan waded into the cold water without hesitation. "The water will hide our heat signatures," he explained as Yuna followed him. "And there is something else that might help us." He led her upstream for almost an hour until they reached a muddy bank where strange 6-winged creatures had built their nests. The creatures scattered at their approach, leaving behind a thick coating of pungent musk that made Yuna wrinkle her nose. "Cover yourself in this," Jinwan instructed as he began smearing the foul-smelling substance on his clothes and skin. "What is this terrible smell?" Yuna asked with obvious disgust. "These creatures are the primary prey of the apex predator on this moon," Jinwan explained. "Their musk contains chemicals that confuse tracking systems and overwhelm biological senses." He watched as Yuna reluctantly followed his example, coating her silver hair and shimmering garments with the dark mud. The Keth hunt by scent as much as by technology, so this should buy us some time. They continued their journey through the night, climbing higher into the mountains. As the temperature dropped and the air grew thin, Yuna moved closer to Jinwan as they walked, and he noticed that her breathing had become labored. "My people are not accustomed to such physical exertion," she admitted. "We usually rely on our abilities to escape danger rather than running like this. Why can you not just transform again?" Jinwan asked. "Become something that flies or something too small to track?" Yuna shook her head sadly. "Shape-shifting requires enormous energy, and I spend most of my reserves healing from my wounds and then revealing myself to you. So I am essentially powerless until I have time to recover." She stumbled on a loose rock, and Jinwan caught her before she could fall. For a moment they stood together in the moonlight, his arms around her slender frame, and he was struck again by how beautiful she was, even covered in foul-smelling mud. "We will rest in the cave system," he said gently. "It is not far now." They reached the entrance to the caves just as the first sun began to rise over the horizon. The opening was hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines, and Jinwan had only discovered it by accident during a survey mission weeks ago inside. The air was thick with the scent of the predators who made these tunnels their home. "Will the creatures here attack us?" Yuna asked nervously as they moved deeper into the darkness. "Not if we stay in the upper passages," Jinwan replied. "They hunt in the lower levels where underground rivers bring prey from across the region." He found a small chamber where they could rest safely and spread out the emergency supplies from their packs. Yuna sat down heavily on a flat stone, and even in the dim light, Jinwan could see the exhaustion on her face. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You know what I am now, and you know that I deceived you. So why do you continue to risk everything for me?" Jinwan sat down across from her and thought carefully before answering. "When I was young," he began, "my father found a wounded bird in our garden and brought it inside to show me. But instead of helping it, he used it as a lesson." He paused, remembering the moment with painful clarity. "He told me that nature was cruel and that trying to save weak creatures was a waste of time. Then he put the bird outside and let it die." Yuna watched him with those luminous eyes that seemed to glow faintly even in the darkness. "I decided then that I would never be like him," Jinwan continued. "I would not walk past suffering when I had the power to help. Because kindness is not weakness and compassion is not foolishness." He met her gaze directly. "When I found you wounded in the forest, I saw that same helpless creature my father abandoned, and I refused to make the same choice he did." Yuna was silent for a long moment before she spoke. "My people have observed countless species across thousands of years," she said softly. "We have seen civilizations rise and fall, watched empires conquer and crumble. But we rarely see what you have shown me." She moved closer to him, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Most beings help others because they expect something in return, whether payment or loyalty or simple gratitude. But you helped me knowing you would receive nothing at all." "I received companionship," Jinwan replied. "Even when I thought you were just an animal, having you there made me feel less alone. So in a way, you gave me exactly what I needed." Yuna squeezed his hand gently. "My people have become watchers instead of participants," she admitted. "We observe and judge, but we never intervene. Never take risks, never allow ourselves to care. And meeting you has made me realize how empty that existence has become." The sound of Keth's search parties echoed distantly from outside the cave. They were running out of time. Jinwan checked his scanner again and felt his heart sink when he saw the readings. The hunters had surrounded the mountain range, cutting off every obvious escape route. "There is no way out," he said grimly. "They have us trapped." Yuna stood up and walked to the edge of the chamber, looking down the dark passage that led deeper into the cave system. "There might be one way," she said slowly, "but it would require you to trust me completely." "I already trust you." She turned to face him, and he saw both hope and fear in her expression. "What I am about to suggest is something no human has ever survived," she warned. "But if we succeed, then we can escape not just this cave, but this entire moon." Jinwan rose to his feet and walked to stand beside her outside. The Keth were closing in, their harsh voices growing louder as they searched the mountainside. "Tell me," he said. Yuna took both of his hands in hers. "My people can travel through dimensions, folding space to move instantly from one place to another. But the passage requires perfect synchronization between two beings." Her grip tightened. "If your trust in me wavers, even for an instant, the dimensional fold will tear you apart." Jinwan looked into her eyes and saw the truth of what she was asking. This was not just about physical survival, but about something much deeper. "Then we better not fail," he said. With a small smile, Yuna pulled him close as golden light began to emanate from her skin, wrapping around both of them like a cocoon. The last thing Jinwan saw before the universe twisted around him was her face, beautiful and determined and filled with an emotion that might have been love. Then everything disappeared into light. Jinwan could not move from his bed as he stared at the woman who had appeared in his room. His mind struggled to connect the small wounded creature he had rescued with this stunning being who now stood before him, her silver hair catching the dim emergency lights of the station. "I know you must be confused," Yuna said softly, her voice carrying the same gentle quality he had sensed in Bile's chirps. "Please let me explain everything." She took a careful step toward him, her movements graceful and fluid like water flowing over smooth stones. Jinwan finally found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. "What are you?" he managed to ask. Yuna tilted her head slightly, a gesture that reminded him so much of Bile that he felt his fear begin to fade. "I am a Valorian," she answered. "My people are an ancient race, older than most civilizations in this galaxy, and we possess the ability to change our physical form at will." She sat down on the edge of his bed, keeping a respectful distance as she continued her explanation. "For thousands of years, we have traveled among the stars, observing younger species as they grow and develop, and we judge whether they are worthy of joining the greater galactic community." Jinwan shook his head slowly, trying to process what she was telling him. "You were testing me," he said, and the realization brought a bitter taste to his mouth. Yuna lowered her eyes, and he saw what looked like genuine shame cross her beautiful features. "Yes," she admitted, "that is how it began, but I need you to understand the full truth." She explained that Valorians often took the form of small, helpless creatures and placed themselves in the path of other species. Most beings ignored them or walked past without a second thought. Some saw them as prey or captured them for profit. Very few, she said, showed genuine compassion without expecting anything in return. "I was attacked by real hunters," Yuna continued, "a species called the Keth who chase my people across the galaxy, because our biological material is worth more than entire planets on the black market." Her voice grew heavy with old pain as she spoke. "My wounds were genuine, and I truly was dying when you found me. So when you chose to save me instead of following your protocols, that was not part of any test." Jinwan listened as she described the weeks that followed, how she had intended to heal and leave without revealing herself. But something had changed as the days passed. "You talked to me," she said with wonder in her voice. Not just simple words, but your real thoughts and feelings and fears. And you treated me like I mattered even though I was just a small animal to you. She looked up at him with those luminous violet eyes. In all my centuries of observation, I have rarely seen such kindness given so freely to a creature that could offer nothing in return. Jinwan felt his anger softening despite himself. He thought about all those nights when he had poured out his heart to Bile, sharing things he had never told another living soul. So our connection, he said slowly. Was that real or was it just part of your observation? Yuna reached out and took his hand in hers. Her skin was warm and impossibly soft, and he felt a tingling sensation where they touched. It became real, she said firmly. What I feel for you now is something I have not experienced in a very long time, and it frightens me as much as it fills me with joy. Before Jinwan could respond, a harsh alarm suddenly blared through the station. Red warning lights began flashing as automated systems detected incoming vessels. Breaking through the atmosphere, Yuna's expression transformed. From gentle to terrified in an instant, she released his hand and stood up quickly, her silver hair swirling around her as she moved toward the window. They found me, she whispered with dread in her voice. Who found you? Jinwan demanded as he jumped out of bed and ran to his control console. He pulled up the external sensors and felt his blood turn cold when he saw 3 large ships descending toward his station, their hulls covered in jagged spikes and weapon ports. The Keth, Yuna answered. The same hunters who wounded me before. And they must have tracked my energy signature here. She turned to face him with desperation in her eyes. You need to run, Jinwan. Take your emergency shuttle and leave this moon immediately, because they will kill anyone who stands between them and their prey. Jinwan stared at her for a long moment as the alarm continued to wail. He thought about everything she had told him, about the test and the deception and the complicated truth behind their connection. Then he thought about the small creature he had held in his arms, the weight of that fragile body pressed against his chest, and the trust in those luminous eyes. No, he said firmly. Yuna looked at him with confusion. You do not understand what the Keth are capable of doing to you. Maybe not, Jinwan admitted as he moved to a storage locker and began pulling out survival equipment. But I already saved you once, and I'm not about to abandon you now just because things got more dangerous. He tossed her a pack filled with emergency supplies and grabbed another for himself. You know this moon better than I do, since you had 3 weeks to watch me survey it. And I know every predator and plant and hidden cave within 100 kilometers. Yuna watched him with an expression that mixed disbelief with something that looked like hope. You would risk your life for me, even knowing that our meeting was part of a test? Jinwan paused and looked directly into her violet eyes. You said our connection became real, he answered. Well, I felt something real too, even when I thought you were just a cute little animal. So if that feeling was true for both of us, then nothing else matters. The station shook as the first Keth ship landed nearby, and they could hear the heavy footsteps of armored hunters beginning to surround the building. Yuna moved to stand beside him, and he noticed that her fear had been replaced by a fierce determination. There is a cave system in the eastern mountains, she said quickly. The predators there produce a scent that masks other biological signatures. So if we can reach it, then the Keth will lose our trail. Jinwan nodded and grabbed her hand. Then let us go. They slipped out through a maintenance hatch at the back of the station, just as the main doors were torn from their hinges. Jinwan could hear the Keth raiders shouting in a harsh guttural language as they stormed inside, their weapons charging with deadly energy. The forest was dark around them as they ran, guided only by the bioluminescent fungi that grew on the trees and the light of the 3 moons overhead. Yuna kept pace with him easily despite her flowing garments, her silver hair streaming behind her like a banner. I'm sorry, she said as they pushed through thick vegetation. I brought this danger to your world and to your life. Apologize later, Jinhuan replied between breaths. Run now. Behind them, the research station exploded in a ball of fire as the Keth destroyed everything. In their search for the Valorian they had hunted across the stars, Jinhuan did not look back. He just held tightly to Yuna's hand and ran toward the distant mountains where safety waited somewhere. In the darkness ahead, the hunt had begun. But for the first time, the prey was not running alone. Park Jinhuan wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked through the dense forest of Kepler 442b, his boots sinking slightly into the soft purple moss that covered everything on this strange moon. He had been working alone at the research station for 8 months now, cataloging the countless species that lived on this frontier world. And the loneliness had become a constant companion that followed him everywhere he went. The twin suns were setting behind the crystalline mountains in the distance, casting long shadows through the towering trees that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Jinhuan checked his scanner and frowned at the readings, noticing something unusual about 50 meters to his left. He pushed through a thick curtain of hanging vines and stopped suddenly. When he saw it, a small creature lay curled up beneath a fallen log, its silver fur matted with dark blue blood that seeped from deep wounds across its side. The animal was about the size of a fox from Earth, but it had 6 legs and large luminous eyes that reflected the fading light like tiny moons. Jinhuan knelt down slowly. Not wanting to frighten the injured creature, protocol demanded that he leave it alone, that he not interfere with the natural order of this alien ecosystem. But something in those eyes made him forget every rule he had ever learned. The creature whimpered softly, a sound so filled with pain and fear that Jinhuan felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces. He reached out his hand carefully, letting the animal smell his fingers before he touched its trembling body. "It is okay, little one," he whispered gently. "I am not going to hurt you." The creature seemed to understand something in his tone, because it stopped shaking and allowed him to examine its wounds. Deep gashes ran along its ribs, probably from a predator attack, and one of its 6 legs was bent at an unnatural angle. Jinhuan made his decision without hesitation. He removed his jacket and wrapped the creature carefully, lifting it into his arms as he stood up and began the long walk back to his station. The animal weighed almost nothing, like holding a bundle of clouds wrapped in silk, and it pressed its small head against his chest as if seeking comfort from the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Back at the station, Jinhuan worked through the night to clean and bandage the creature's wounds. He had no idea what medicines might help an alien species, so he relied on basic first aid and his own intuition. The creature watched him the entire time with those enormous eyes that seemed to hold galaxies within their depths. "I'm going to call you Bile," Jinhuan said as he finished wrapping the last bandage. "It means star in my language, and your eyes remind me of stars." Bile made a soft chirping sound that Jinhuan chose to interpret as approval. Over the following days, Jinhuan devoted himself to caring for his unexpected guest. He prepared soft foods that the creature could eat easily and created a comfortable bed from spare blankets near his own sleeping quarters. What surprised him most was how intelligent Bile seemed to be. The creature watched him constantly, its head tilting with curiosity whenever he spoke or worked on his research. When Jinhuan talked about his findings, explaining the different species he had cataloged, Bile's ears would perk up as if genuinely interested in every word. "You are a good listener." Jinhuan laughed one evening as he prepared dinner for himself. "Better than most humans I've known." He found himself talking to Bile about everything, sharing stories about his childhood in Korea, his struggles at the academy, and his difficult relationship with his father, who never understood why he wanted to study alien life instead of becoming a doctor like his older brother. "They think I'm wasting my life out here," Jinhuan admitted as Bile curled up beside him on the couch. "Maybe they are right, and I'm just running away from everything." Bile pressed its warm body against his leg as if offering comfort. Jinwan smiled and scratched behind the creature's ears, marveling at how soft the silver fur felt beneath his fingers. "At least I have you now," he said quietly. By the end of the first week, Bile could walk again, limping slightly but growing stronger every day. Jinwan noticed that the creature never tried to leave, never showed any desire to return to the wild where it had been attacked. Instead, Bile followed him everywhere, sitting beside him while he worked and sleeping at the foot of his bed each night. One evening, Jinwan played music from Earth on his small speaker, an old song his mother used to sing to him when he was a child. Bile's ears twitched at the unfamiliar sounds, and the creature moved closer to the speaker, listening with an intensity that seemed almost human. "Do you like it?" Jinwan asked with a warm smile. Bile made that chirping sound again, and Jinwan could have sworn the creature was smiling back at him. 3 weeks passed, and Bile's wounds had healed completely. The silver fur was glossy and beautiful again, and all 6 legs worked perfectly as the creature bounded around the station with playful energy. Jinwan knew he should release Bile back into the wild, but he kept finding excuses to delay just one more day. He told himself each morning, and each day turned into another. That night, Jinwan sat on his bed reading a report on his tablet while Bile rested on the floor nearby. The station was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the life support systems and the occasional call of nocturnal creatures outside. "Good night, Bile," Jinwan said as he turned off the lights and lay down to sleep. He closed his eyes and let the silence wrap around him like a blanket. He did not know how long he had been sleeping when the end light woke him. It was not the artificial light of the station or the pale glow of the moons outside his window. This light was pure and brilliant, filling every corner of the room with a radiance that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Jinwan sat up in his bed, his heart pounding with sudden fear as he searched for the source. His eyes found Bile, but the creature he had nursed back to health was no longer there. In its place stood something impossible, something his mind could not fully comprehend. The small 6-legged animal was rising onto its hind legs, its body stretching and growing as the silver fur seemed to dissolve into particles of light. Jinwan watched in stunned silence as limbs elongated and reshaped, as features shifted, transformed before his eyes. The light grew so bright that he had to shield his face with his arm. When it finally faded and he dared to look again, Jinwan forgot how to breathe. Standing where Bile had been was a woman of impossible beauty. Her hair was the same silver white as the creature's fur, flowing down her back like liquid moonlight. Her eyes, those same luminous eyes that had watched him for weeks, were now set in a delicate face with features that seemed carved from starlight itself. Her skin shimmered faintly, and she wore flowing garments that appeared to be woven from the fabric of the night sky. She looked at Jinwan with an expression that held gratitude, wonder, and something that might have been affection when she spoke. Her voice was like music, soft and melodic and utterly alien. "Hello, Jinwan," she said gently. "My name is Yuna, and I owe you my life."